Good morning, everybody. I'm sure you're looking forward to interacting with your teachers and your friends, and we hope your offline classes will start very soon. Till that time, let us begin reading. This book is titled English Through Reading. It's a collection of some insightful essays and a few interesting stories. The first essay that we are going to study today is Civilization and History. It's by a writer, C.E.M. Joad, who wrote long time ago in 1962, but it is very valuable for the points that he makes. Now, most of you have studied history up to class 10. And when we read a history book, what does the history book tell us? About kings and how long they ruled. And when they're telling us about a king, the first half of that king's life is described to us in the battles that he fought. The greater the king, the more the battles, and of course, victories. But what happens in war? When there's a battle, people die. And if everyone would die, then how would life go on? Because civilization is a record of the culture, customs, traditions, fair and just laws by which a group of people have, immortalized themselves. Like we have the Indus Valley civilization in India long ago with beautiful roads and sloping drains and sloping bathrooms and such marvelous things that have been discovered in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. We have our own Gupta civilization in Bihar, in Patliputra. We have the Mughal kings who ruled us, and we have the Rajputs who ruled over Rajasthan, and we see there's great forts. But as far as history is concerned, history is always a record of battles. So he's wanting us to understand the fine line that separates civilization from history as far as these wars are concerned. It's a good thought to have. So the first paragraph, I'm reading it aloud to you. I hope you bought this book. It's available in Sanjay Book Depot. And anywhere in the city. It's a collection of stories and essays, and it's good to have it with you so that when you have a text you can understand what the teacher is doing better. Most of the people who appear most often and most gloriously in the history books are great conquerors and generals and soldiers, whereas the people who really helped civilization forward are often never mentioned at all. And in the next sentence he's telling us who are the people, who provided medical help, who launched a seaworthy boat, who calculated the length of the year, who manured a field and improved its productivity so that there was more food for everyone to eat, then more to sell, and therefore to buy other things as well. This is normally, we only have the record of kings and generals and those who fought battles. But those we do not know who first set a broken leg. The names of great medical writers are there. But the simple man in a village who must have just tied two bones together with straw, we don't know his name. Or launched a seaworthy boat, who dug a boat, or built one boat and did that, sent it away, or calculated the length of the year. Now, in these 7 months, when you were sitting at home alone, if you didn't get the newspapers, you didn't know whether it was Sunday or Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, because every day was the same. You got up, we cooked and cleaned and ate and watched some TV, and then again the day came to an end and we went to sleep. it was a difficult time, but at least so many months have passed, and finally college is open, and your admission has happened, and hopefully, if the good news continues on the health front, we might have offline classes, and you'll all be able to come to college, and that will be just wonderful. But we know all about the killers and destroyers. He's a bit upset about that. People think a great deal of them, so much so that on all the highest pillars in the great cities of the world, you will find the figure of a conqueror or a general or a soldier. Yes, you have Rani of Jhansi's statue, you have Shivaji's statue in front of Moti Jheel. We have sometimes the statue of a holy man, but more often than not, we have the statue of a fighter. And I think most people believe that the greatest countries are those that have beaten in battle the greatest number of other countries and ruled over them as conquerors. Even now, you find that countries often invade each other and attack each other, and they do that as a show of strength, as a sign of their powers. It is just possible they are, but they are not the most civilized. C.M. Joad is very particular about this. Fighting and civilization actually do not go hand in hand. Fighting, he says, animals fight, so do savages. Now, a cruel and violent person is called a savage, and it is also used to describe those primitive people who have not been exposed to a gentler, more peaceful form of living, who only know that they have to fight to assert their rights, they have to fight and attack an animal, then only they'll have food. So those kinds of people who haven't yet been exposed to a gentler way of life or a more peaceful way of life, we call them savages. It's not the best thing to say, but primitive is a better word. So animals fight, and so do primitive people. Hence, to be good at fighting is to be good in the way that an animal or a savage is good, but it is not to be civilized. No? Imagine you're upset with someone, you take off your slipper. Oh, my God, you got your slipper to hit? Somebody will be shocked. Now, somewhere it will be very common taking out a slipper, and in some places it won't be acceptable. It will be scandalous. Imagine you took off a slipper. So, in different cultures, communities, or families, some form of violence is acceptable, but you might raise your voice. Somewhere even raising your voice is considered very violent. Isn't that so? So, it says that if we are good at fighting, we are like animals or savages, and that's definitely not being civilized. Even being good at getting other people to fight for you and telling them how to do it most efficiently, this, after all, is what conquerors and generals have done, is not being civilized. We are very proud of when we have relatives who are colonels and majors and brigadiers and squadron leaders, in the forces, in the Air Force, in the Navy. But C.M. Joad is not. He says that if we can make others fight also, we are still not being very civilized. People fight to settle quarrels. Fighting means killing. And civilized people ought to be able to find some way of settling their disputes other than by seeing which side can kill off the greater number of the other side, and then saying that that side which has killed most has won. So, since the reason why people attack each other, hit each other, shoot each other, throw rocket launchers and missiles at each other, is because they don't agree with them. So they hope to destroy them, or to destroy important bridges, or destroy cities, and force them to come to terms, to stop fighting. So they think that by fighting and killing will stop them from fighting. And Joad does not agree. He says that is no way of bringing peace or living in peace, because the one that has more military power, that has better weapons, that has more men, that is the one that is going to kill more, and therefore that will win. And not only has won, but because it has won, has been in the right. Jeet gaye, that means we are right. But if we have won, we might have won unlawfully. We might have won unfairly. Now we drop a lot of bombs somewhere, and then they say, okay, sorry, we won't fight anymore. But we have crushed them. We have used unfair means to crush them. So it says, but when people win, they think they are right because they have won. But that is what going to war means. It means saying that might is right. Now, I normally always engage the class in a discussion for and against this statement, might is right. It's a dangerous thing to discuss because people who are all powerful, we can't challenge them, we don't want to confront them, we don't argue and debate with them, we just hold our hands, put our eyes down and we move away. But there comes a time when maybe that powerful person wants your house or your field or a daughter of the house, then we don't want to give our daughter or our house or our field, and then we look around and look for some help. But because all of us have been silent for such a long time, so sometimes the person who was not so powerful in the beginning, but because we all got afraid of him, has become very powerful. And then it's very difficult to make that powerful man back down. So might is right. Having power, does that make a person correct? This word right, it can mean sahi, it can mean haq, and it can of course mean a right direction, the right and the left. But might is right means, okay, if you have power, you are in the right. We always don't agree with it, isn't that so? When we are powerful, we think we are right, but when we are faced with someone more powerful than us, who thinks he's right and then doesn't agree with our idea of right, we are a bit challenged. So, to be just and fair, to give everyone an equal chance, we have to make the mighty ones realize that they cannot always be right. Might is not right. Might may be right, but might is not always right. Because often, once we have power, we tend to misuse it. So, I'd like you, to write this heading in your notebooks. It's assignment number 1 for this lesson. Because the purpose of higher education is to make you think. Only if you have learned to think, first about general issues, and of course simultaneously about yourself in a balanced way, facing reality, that you can make progress and you can adapt to the changing environment. Now, I love an offline class. I just enjoy being with students. If I'm sick, my fever will go. I'm invigorated. If I have a cold, once I'm in class, I'll stop sneezing. I just love to be in a class with my students. But now, since you're not in front of me, it would be in one way difficult to even imagine teaching. But if this is the time in which for you to come before me, for me to come before you, is putting our lives at danger, at risk. So I must do my best in these given circumstances. I cannot object and say, no, I don't like this online class, I will not teach it, let the children be. But so many months have passed and we haven't used our minds. So I'd like you to write this on the top of a page, divide your page into 2, and think of 5 reasons in favor of might is right, and think of 5 points that prove that might is not always right. Right may not be might. There may be weak people, helpless people who also are in the right, who are ignored. Like sometimes they're living in a forest and someone wants to cut the forest for the sake of some minerals in that forest, or maybe to build an apartment in that forest. Sometimes there's a jheel or a lake, but the land is beautiful, so someone wants to make a resort there, so all the villagers can't take water from there. So when powerful men come and take over something, the poor villagers are helpless. They have to find some other source of food or water. So is that right? They're simple people. Should their needs and demands and requirements be set aside because someone is powerful and can overpower them or crush them? So just put those points down, put those thoughts down, think about it. Now the second paragraph says, that is what the whole story of mankind has on the whole been like. Generally we have been fighting to prove ourselves right. Even our own age, the 20th century, has fought the two greatest wars in history. Which ones? World War I in 1914 and World War II that began in 1939, in which millions of people were killed or mutilated. Killed are just straight away, shot, a bomb exploded and they died. Mutilated is when they were harmed violently, brutally, and maybe they lost a ear, an arm, or a leg, eyes. So when parts of the body have been torn or damaged in the fighting, then that is mutilated. And while today it is true that people do not fight and kill each other on the streets, while that is to say, we have got to the stage. The stage here is a level. There's a stage on which you perform, you sing, you act, then you have stage 3 or stage 4 of this vaccine development or vaccine checking, human trials, step of keeping the rules and behaving properly to each other. In daily life, nations and countries have not learned to do this yet and still behave like savages. So at least when we, ordinary people, when you leave the house, you don't have a pistol in your bag or purse or in your pocket. Why? Because you don't expect to take it out and shoot. We're not living in some war-torn valley, or we're not living in a place where we're surrounded by enemies and shooters, and so we just come out with our hands and legs. We may not even have a stick with us because we are hoping that we'll come out, meet people, do our work and go home safely without needing to fight for our protection. So common people have learned to live without a fight. In fact, it's an interesting thing to know that this custom of shaking hands began in England when people used to wear very loose flowing garments and they might tie a sword or a knife up their arm. And so when people met each other, shook each other's hands quite hardly, hard, to just make sure that something will clang or something will hit, or something will fall if someone has got a weapon hidden up his sleeve. And now, of course, it's just a nice, polite way of address. Hello, how are you? Shake hands. But it was earlier a way of testing whether the other person had a weapon or not. So he says that at least we have learned to live normally, but countries still have armies and countries still go to battle because they haven't learned yet to live like civilized people. They're still, in that primitive state of just fighting for their rights and preservation. So we have a paragraph that is left, but it's an interesting one that will take some more time. Actually, a very long lesson sometimes cannot even be delivered technologically. So I'll take your leave and we'll continue this lesson next time.